Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. So today's video is all about the MacBook Pro versus the iPad Pro. So a lot of people are talking about whether to go for the iPad or for the MacBook. And I thought to make a video to tell you guys exactly what device to go for and what's more suitable for you. So whether you're a student, whether you're a programmer, a gamer, or whatever person you are, one of these devices fits perfectly for you. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So what we have here is the MacBook Pro M1 and the iPad Pro M1. So they are both Pro devices. They both have the Apple M1 silicon chip. They are both 8-core CPU and GPU. The only thing is between these two devices is that one device here, the MacBook Pro, has a 16 GB of RAM, while the iPad Pro has 8 GB of RAM. As you may know, the 8 GB RAM models go from 128 GB till 512 GB, while the 1 TB and the 2 TB storage of the iPad Pro comes automatically with a 16 GB RAM. And what I have here, and I've made an unbox video about this device just has the 8 GB RAM, but still it's blastly fast. I've used this device for almost 2 days and I haven't had any problems with it. I can play heavy games on it and at the same time go to Lightroom, switch to Photoshop, and even write a script down without breaking a sweat. But at the other hand, we have here the MacBook Pro with the 16 GB of RAM, and this one didn't let me down for almost 6 months. It's a great device. I haven't had any problem with it, and it's overall a great device. I don't regret the 1700 euros I spent on whatsoever. It served me very well, and I would have done the same thing if I could go back in time. But what we have here is another category of device. They basically do the same, but there are a difference in their own way. So let's start with the keyboard of both devices. What we have here is the keyboard of the MacBook Pro, and this keyboard feels very great. Unlike the previous model where we have the scissor switch, nowadays Apple uses the butterfly mechanism. But at the same time, what we have here, those clicks are similar to the clicks of these keyboards, but they are different in their own way. They are more clickable. They produce much more noise than this one, and they feel less qualitative than the keyboard of the MacBook Pro. But that's my own opinion. I find that the keyboard of the MacBook Pro is just perfect. It has a nice travel. It's not very noisy. It has this dim. And overall, I haven't had any problems with the keyboard of the MacBook Pro. Whereas the Magic Keyboard has this clickable keys, and that can be something for you, but it's not for me. I like that the less noise it has, the better the keyboard is. That's something where the MacBook Pro wins over the Magic Keyboard. But there are two things that I find better in the MacBook Pro over the Magic Keyboard, which is the trackpad. We have here a much bigger trackpad. The trackpad of the Magic Keyboard is smaller, so all those gestures go easily with this big area than when we have it here. Don't get me wrong, most of the gestures do work on this Magic Keyboard, on this trackpad, but you have less area than this trackpad of the MacBook Pro. And another thing that I don't find in this keyboard, and I do understand where it comes from, is this touch bar. And I know there are a lot of people who don't like the touch bar, but if you would ask me, I do like the touch bar actually. It's a very nice looking touch bar. It has multiple functionalities. If you are on a browser like Safari or something, and let's say I open multiple tabs, for example, first I get all those favorite tabs or all those favorite websites suggested on this trackpad. And secondly, if I can just scroll over all my favorite websites in just a click of a button. But what I also like is the fact that I can switch between those tabs just from this touch bar. So I do like it. There are people who prefer the physical keys, and I do understand why. But I bought this MacBook on purpose because there are some noises that this touch bar will not be available in the future MacBook Pros, which I find a bit sad. But hey, whatever, it doesn't matter. Those physical keys are also good, but this touch bar is nice to have in a laptop. Whereas the Magic Keyboard doesn't have that touch bar, but that doesn't matter because you have the click of the screen, so you can just go with your fingers over the screen and click whatever you want on the screen. That's something that the Magic or that the MacBook Pro doesn't have. I will discuss that in a minute. But the keyboard of the MacBook Pro wins over the Magic Keyboard just because of those functionalities. And there's one more thing. This escape key, I can't find it in the Magic Keyboard. Why is that? Why don't we have the escape key on the Magic Keyboard? Yes, I do understand that you can just go with your finger and touch whatever you want just to cancel the task you're working on. That's something you can do. It's very easy. You just hover over it and click it away. But I find myself going to that escape key more often than you would think. You will miss this escape key once you don't have it anymore. And I experienced that same lack of a button in the Magic Keyboard. And that's all I can say about both keyboards. If you ask me, I think the keyboard of the MacBook Pro wins over the keyboard of the Magic Keyboard. The second thing I want to talk about are the displays. So on the right side, on the MacBook Pro, we have a 13.3-inch diagonal display. And on the left side, we have a 12.9-inch display of the actual iPad. So the display is this one is slightly bigger, even though I don't notice. To my eyes, both screens seem to be the same size. And what I guess is that's when you have this slightly difference in sizes. So if you're planning on buying one of these devices and you are thinking about the size of one of these devices, just keep in mind the 12.9-inch of the iPad Pro looks or feels exactly the same as the display of the MacBook Pro. But that's the size, quality of the display. So we all know that the display of the iPad Pro is a Liquid Retina XDR display, whereas the MacBook Pro is just a Retina display. And I should say there is definitely a difference in both displays. This one is much brighter. It looks much cleaner. It's something I do like. If you just look at the quality of the display, you definitely find that this one just wins over the display of the MacBook Pro. If I just turn it up all the way up, I'm not sure if that difference is visible in the camera, but I can assure you that this one is slightly different. It's slightly better than the display of the MacBook Pro. They're both Retina display, but that XDR component just make it a slight better experience. It gives us this natural look. Those colors are popping more out of the display than the colors of the MacBook Pro. So yeah, this display definitely wins over the display of the MacBook Pro. So now we've talked about the keyboard and the display of both devices. Let's go ahead and check the material of both devices. So if I just clap this one down, if I close both devices, there is something that's definitely noticeable. The material of the MacBook Pro is made out of aluminum, whereas the material of the Magic Keyboard, I should say, is made of polyurethane. So if I just open this one up and I take the iPad out of it, obviously the iPad is made out of aluminum. So both devices are equal when it comes to the material of both devices. But when it comes to the Magic Keyboard, it's not made out of aluminum. And you need to keep that in mind. Why? Because I know for sure that this, when you put it in your bag, when you just travel with it, go to school with it, this one will be damaged over time. It will not look this nice as you see it right now. I just bought it like the day before yesterday. So it looks very clean. It looks very, very nice, but that feeling will not last forever. Whereas the feeling of the MacBook Pro will definitely last forever if you just take care of it, obviously. You can't just throw it away and accept that you don't have any scratches on it about 5 years from now. But the material is good. You can just put it in your bag or whatever, and those scratches will be less visible than the scratches of the material of this product. But don't get me wrong, that's just the Magic Keyboard. If we take the iPad separately, we find out that the material of this iPad is made out of aluminum, so that's something that you should think about. Plus, your aluminum material is covered by this polyurethane Magic Keyboard. So yeah, if you would ask me, I still would go for the MacBook Pro just because it's a one coherent device, the material of the MacBook Pro, but the this combination of Magic Keyboard and aluminum iPad is also fine. And that's actually it. Both devices have their pros, they both have their cons. And if I can just give you one advice, if you are a student, if you are writing a lot of stuff if you make a lot of notes, then definitely go for the iPad. This one will serve you a lot, except if you are a programmer. If you are a programmer, then I would definitely go for the MacBook Pro because yeah, you can just download applications like Sublime Text or VS Code or Atom. And this iPad doesn't have those applications yet. Maybe in the future we should see, but they aren't on the iPad yet. The same thing goes for video editors. We have Final Cut Pro. The iPad doesn't have Final Cut Pro. You can work with iMovie, but that's something that you should determine for yourself. iMovie is a great editor software. It served me a lot in the past, but Final Cut Pro has that nice touch on it that give your video just that little bit magic that you should go for if you are making videos. But that's something that you should think about. If you are a gamer, then definitely go for the iPad Pro. You can download Call of Duty, FIFA, and what I do like about this iPad, it's so powerful that you can just do whatever you want. Just go and watch a movie on your iPad, and if you are done with your movie, you can just go back to your game and it picks just from the place where you left it. So that's something it shocked me. That's how powerful the M1 chip is. And we talk about the 8 GB of RAM, whereas the MacBook Pro has a 16 GB of RAM. You can also buy it with an 8 GB of RAM. I don't recommend that. Just go for a 16 GB if you are planning to buy the MacBook Pro. But still, this thing is very powerful. It handles big applications without breaking a sweat. There are no crashes. I guess that's because we are just dealing with a new device. As more as more iOS upgrades are coming, you would definitely notice that there is a decrease in speed and powerfulness. But overall, I bet this iPad will stay here for the next 8 years. Easy. You can definitely work with your iPad for the next 8 years without worrying about losing any quality whatsoever. So I haven't talked about the camera. I haven't talked about the fact that it has touchscreen, whereas the MacBook Pro doesn't have touchscreen. That's something that's obvious. If you are planning on buying one of these devices, just know, yeah, definitely the iPad will have touchscreen. The MacBook Pro doesn't have a touch screen except for this touch bar in here. With the iPad, you can make pictures, but hey, who makes pictures with an iPad? I do understand if you are in a class and you want to make a picture of a note of someone else, then definitely this one is very handy. But nowadays we all have phones and we can achieve the same thing with our phone. And that's actually it, guys. I hope you find this video helpful. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about both devices. Should you go for the iPad Pro M1 or the MacBook Pro M1? Give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.